Great. Thank you so much. Hello, my name is Dave Leopold. I'm the Director of Strategic Development for LucidLink. And first, I want to thank Future Media Conferences for helping to put this together because I'm really, really excited to be talking with the team today behind the Emmy Award winning, critically acclaimed series Atlanta. We have with us assistant editors Jen Bryson and Cameron Ross, as well as producer Caitlin Waldron. So thank you all for joining us. Um, what I'd love to do just to start, I used to work as an editor. Before that, I was an assistant editor, and I know that not only do people not really know what assistant editors do, but they're sort of the unsung heroes of post production. So Jen, if you could actually just sort of give a quick overview of some of the things that you do that people might not realize.
Sure. So the name sort of gives you the basis. I assist the editor. My editor is Kyle Ryder, and Cam works for Isaac Hagee, who are the two editors on Atlanta. The most important thing about our job is organization. We bring in footage, organize it for our editors, and just make sure that they can be as creative as they need to be, and we handle everything else. So organizing, processing, answering any questions they have about footage, reaching out to production, all those things. And then on the back end, it's our job to make sure that all those creative decisions they made during the edit gets to our other houses like color and sound. So turnovers are the next big part of our job. So handling all of those things so that all of the creative people above us can really function at their best.
That's great. And so you sort of live at the intersection of creative and technical to some degree. Cameron, as an assistant editor, you really need to be proactive problem solvers. Um, at what point do you usually get involved in an episode? Do you see the scripts or does footage just arrive and they say go?
Yeah, I mean, it's from the beginning. I mean, it depends on the project, but for the most part, we get the scripts and just to get a heads up on what is coming through the episode, especially because in dailies, we're dealing with scenes. So I want to know what scenes we've shot, what scenes are coming up, what scenes are still TBD, about to be shot. Because that's also a part of it, sort of tracking what's coming in when, and knowing if we have everything, because that's a common question for the editor. It's like, do we have this scene? Do we have that? Can I edit this whole chunk together? So it's really from the very beginning tracking what's happening. And then once you're through dailies, I mean, that's when it actually it's a little easier in some ways because you're not keeping up with footage anymore. You're really working more on the episodes and sort of honing them and helping in a different kind of way with the editors.
Fantastic. And so Caitlin, as a producer, you're involved from the very, very beginning all the way through delivery. You're sort of shepherding everything through and solving problems along the way. How much of your time do you spend really thinking about and working on the post-production side?
All of my time. So I'm first and foremost a post producer, and I focus completely on what happens to the show outside of it being shot. So ideally, I start working during prep, and I work really closely with the DP and the directors and the showrunners to sort of understand the ideas behind what they're shooting. Our DP on Atlanta is this wildly talented person named Christian Springer, and he is super collaborative. And so we start talking really early about what the camera choices are, how they want to shoot everything, how we want to handle media. And then I take those kind of ideas back to Jen and Cam, and we start to talk about the best ways to organize all of that, how we want to process media for the purposes of our dailies, what we want to cut in, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we start really early, and then we set up dailies. We work with production while that's happening, and then, try to make a plan at the very beginning that will set us up to succeed in the editing and especially the finishing process, which, as everyone knows, there's never enough time to do well. So that's our focus from the very beginning.
And with Atlanta, I know that you maximize your resources as much as possible. and there's always constraints along the way. Um, is there anything specific that you can think of that where you've really stepped in and said, here's a big problem we can solve, or here's how we can boost the production values, regardless of what resources we have at our disposal?
So there's a few things that we do in Atlanta. It's important for everyone to remember that before Atlanta was like a popular show that everyone loved very much, we were this very scrappy cable comedy that people were like, I guess we'll let you make it, but we don't really know what it is. So our first season, we had a very, very small budget. We had like no money for visual effects. We didn't know, was very, very tight. So we introduced a few things really early on that comes from sort of my background, the backgrounds of our editors and editors. We cut in Premiere, which we think allows us to have a lot more control, especially when it comes to doing visual effects in-house. We do something really different on this show as well, which is why I rely so heavily on Jen and Cam, which is that we manage the conform and all aspects of finishing in editorial. So, we cut in ProRes proxy, and then when we lock episodes, we link back to the high res media. Jen and Cam do all of that in-house, which is very hard in case anyone's wondering. And sort of allows us to have a ton of control over what's happening through the finishing process. And we don't have to rely as much on a post house to do a lot of those functions, which are very costly and time consuming. It also we do everything with our visual effects in-house as well. So we have an in-house visual effects artist who works with us every day. It allows us to be really creative with the visual effects and go back and forth on shots and really hone them in for the storytelling aspect. It also kind of like just keeps a lot of that under our roof. We had to work this season 4, with some bigger visual effects companies to do some much bigger lifts, which you all will be seeing next week. And that was kind of the first time we'd ever done that. So most of the work we do is entirely under like the roof of our little editorial house. And that's all comes from working in a really scrappy way, but we really love the results because we focus everything on creativity first, and how to tell the story the best.
Great. And so Atlanta shoots in Georgia, and you do post in LA. Jen, can you sort of talk us through what the workflow was for the first 2 seasons, I guess?
Well, Caitlin, I think actually you should answer that one. I started on season 2.
Okay.
It was a lot more mellow than season 3 and 4, but Caitlin, why don't you talk about that?
Oh, yeah, so season 1, we also don't work with the post house for dailies. So we have an amazing DIT who works on set. His name's Chris Hoyle, and he would actually do all of the processing and syncing for dailies, send that media to us in LA, and then we would process it and work on it in editorial. We've slowly released parts of that process over time, but because we were shooting in Atlanta, it would be this kind of like overnight Aspera footage. We kept all of that within the production. We weren't working with a post house, and we really didn't start working with post houses at all until season 3.
Got it. And so you had this workflow down for 2 seasons, and then you find out season 3 is going to be shooting in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you know that you were actually going to shoot in Europe right away, or did you think you'd be doubling some of the locations here in the States for Europe?
I think we knew right away we were going to be shooting in Europe. We don't do anything easy on Atlanta, so we would never do that. And at the end of season 2, our characters left for Europe, and I think that there was always this idea, like, okay, season 3 will be a Europe season, and then this like COVID thing happened, which pushed it all off for a while. But when we were actually able to come back and start shooting, we knew it was going to happen in Europe. We knew that was the plan. And but adding an extra layer to that was that not only were we shooting in Europe, but we as a post team all had to work remotely. from each other for the first time as well. So we were dealing with a much bigger distance for handling dailies and media, also working with, European crews that we didn't have familiarity with. And then we all weren't able to be in the same place as well. So it was an extra layer of challenge, I think, that we were handed for season 3.
And you were working with a smaller crew as well for production, right?
Yeah, so they kept the crew on the ground in Europe really small for the most part, especially the core, the core crew, because of COVID restrictions and because they were moving all over Europe, right? So we shot a bunch in London, and then they would go to Amsterdam, and then they would shoot in this other place outside in England. And so all of that, became this this sort of infrastructure challenge, shall we say, that we had to kind of like figure out the best way to approach, so that we wouldn't sacrifice anything creatively.
Got it. And so, Cameron, when you first heard, we're going to be shooting in Europe, but post is still, back in LA, but we're all working remote. What were the steps that you started going through in your mind to figure out how to solve this?
Yeah. So the first thing, I mean, we used Premiere, and also we were using Premiere Productions for the first time, which
Hmm.
we're really excited about doing. And honestly, we went to Adobe and we said, hey, we're all going to be remote. What's the best way to do this? And we were thinking less about the dailies, because the dailies were like, well, worst case scenario, we just spare it somewhere and we'll figure that out from a post house. But we said, what do we do? Like, what is productions like as far as cloud compute, cloud server? And that's when they suggested LucidLink to us, and we just took their recommendation fully because they said it's great. And it is great because it worked exactly like we were used to in the office, in that we were basically just mounting a server to all of our computers, even though we were all spread throughout LA, and the production and all of our media was living in Lucid, and we were able to just work as we normally would. So, and then the flip side of that is it worked out better than we could have imagined for all the dailies that we were doing in Europe, because we thought we were just going to, what we did, even when we were in Atlanta for season 2, it was in the morning, we would pull up the Aspera, we download, or Media Shell or whatever, we download all our dailies to our local server. And then, maybe we'd wait an hour, whatever it is, to download. And our, like we said, the budgets aren't great. So sometimes the internet isn't so fast in there. And, we're waiting to download stuff. And so that would be the normal process. But now with Lucid, what we actually did, we were able to set up all of our dailies houses in London, in Amsterdam, and in Paris. We were able to hook them up to a piece of our Lucid server, and then they were able to upload dailies directly to the server, which meant with the LA time change to London, that there were days where we were getting dailies at 7 p.m. that were shot the same day. They're obviously earlier, but we were actually able to start ordering dailies technically same day, and the editors could start cutting first thing the next day. So it sped up the process more than I ever thought it could. And it worked out a lot better than I ever really imagined. It's pretty great.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love the idea that you were able to inadvertently, without even trying, take advantage of the time zones. And, by the time the European team was done, things were starting to roll in LA. So I just want to pause for a second. For those of you who are joining us who don't know, Productions in Premiere Pro is a fairly new feature that allows for bin locking and sort of that extra level of collaboration that professional productions really rely on. And that came out right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was great, but it requires centralized storage. And so people really needed to be on-prem working off a NAS or a SAN to be able to really take advantage of productions. And what LucidLink does is we're like a hard drive in the cloud. You put your media in the cloud and then you use it like it's a local drive. So no downloading, no replicating. But what that means is that productions can see your storage in LucidLink, in a LucidLink file space, and allows you to use it as though it were a local server. So yeah, we've been seeing success stories, but this was really one where we really wanted to put a spotlight on it because it's just sort of everything that we've been talking about. How do we accelerate the timeline of between production and post production and speed up post? Forget all the pandemic and problems and extra challenges, but when you were talking about resources, time is one of your biggest resources. Um, Jen, can you talk a little bit about just sort of how you can reuse some of those time savings?
Absolutely. I mean, we considered our job to be an expert on the footage when it comes in, but we're also sort of racing against giving our editors time with that footage when we're organizing it and prepping it for them. So what I find really helpful is the more time that I have on the front end to really watch that footage and dive in. Not only do I get to enjoy it because we're watching amazing performances and a lot of fun stuff, but I get to process it and have a really firm understanding of it. So when my editor comes in and starts working, sometimes we have like 15, 20 setups for a really complicated scene and they're moving from all these different places. And I can give him all the information he needs to hit the ground running, saying like, this setup is here, and then they move on to this part of the scene here, or this setup, they went back and started from the beginning, but this setup is really where you're going to focus for this part of the action. So allowing for me to have that extra time to be able to process those things is so beneficial on the front end. And it makes things not only faster for my editor, but a bit more collaborative, which I always find to be really rewarding.
And, our goal is to keep up with camera, right? So we are trying to process the previous day's footage the next day and do that on a cycle throughout the entire production. So the closer we can be up to camera, the better it is for us to know creatively how things are coming together, especially in a situation where we're jumping between European cities. And if we're saying, hey, maybe we should shoot this thing while you're in Paris and we want to do it before they leave. And so that really sped things up for us.
Right. So how much communication do you have with production, giving them input on, any reshoots or inserts or other things that need to be taken into consideration?
I would
Yeah,
Caitlin?
all the time. I will say that I think Atlanta is a really special show. We have the most wonderful and collaborative, creative leaders on this project. So we're here to help support them, right? So we talk between me and the editors, we talk with Hiro Murai, who's sort of like the supervising director of the show, a couple of times a week at least during production, and we're constantly in communication. There's been a few times in the course of the 4 seasons where we've started to piece together an episode and realized like, oh, we need like a thing to fill, we need a B storyline or something, and then we're able to communicate really quickly back to them things that we need, whether it's pickups or whether it's something much bigger to make the season work. And they are able to respond really quickly to that, which is super, super helpful. That's, I don't think that's always the case in a lot of shows. It's really hard to build that kind of trust and communication, and we're super lucky to have it. But being able to be really fast with the technical processes of our show is what kind of allows us to keep up with them and be moving with them creatively through the shooting process, so we're not like days behind them.
I, from the post standpoint, never felt more seen by production than on this show, and just like sort of it is collaborative. I mean, to the point where we were talking about, because we online in-house, it was preferable for us to shoot on a very specific camera format that would make relinking in Premiere easier. And we said to the camera department, we're like, hey, like this would really help us out if we shot on ProRes Quad, basically. And they listen to us. There are a lot of camera departments be like, no, we're going to shoot, the DPX or whatever. We're going to shoot Airy Raw, whatever it is. But they said, okay, like this is better for the whole entire process, and we will work with you. And that is something that was like amazing to me. And that is sort of like the respect that we have for each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you have a really unique and special team that just sort of operates at full capacity, playing off of each other's strengths as much as possible, and that really gives you a cohesive and team effort on all of these. As far as the other people that are involved in post and conform, well, you do the conform yourself, but color, audio, visual effects, how many people are collaborating along with you?
Do you want me to answer?
Sure, Caitlin. Yeah, thanks.
We have amazing, like truly the most wonderful team of creative partners. So we do color correction with a colorist named Ricky Gossas. He was at a facility called MPC for a really long time, and now he has his own place called Traffic. And he has literally colored every frame of the show from the pilot through the finishing. He is a huge part of the way that the show looks and works really closely with Christian, our DP, who also stays very involved in the color and finishing process, and Hero. And so that is a huge part of the way the show looks, and he's been a constant throughout. We also have this amazing sound team. Our sound supervisors, Trevor Gates. We have mixers, Diego Gat and Sam Edgeness, and they're all at this place called Formosa in LA. They've worked from season 2 on the show, and are also like huge part of the collaboration of how the show feels and sounds. So we have this, like, it's a tight team, and it's not there aren't a ton of people who touch every episode, and they tend to stay the same people, and I think that has a lot to do with the way that the show feels. Everyone's very, very committed, and I think feels their ownership of what they bring to the show creatively, and that's what makes it good. Honestly, it's a huge team effort.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it starts because we have people leading the show who believe in that, right? Like Donald, wildly collaborative, Hero, amazingly collaborative. They give everyone sort of the leeway to bring their best to making it, and I think that it shows.
And so when you talk about the collaboration, we have mentioned that obviously starting in season 3, you had to go remote. How was the collaboration affected by having to just sort of move your processes to different places? Was anybody in-house for anything? Was everybody remote? Jen?
We were entirely remote, so nobody in-house, no central office or anything. We were all working from our homes. The only people together were Cam and I, which was great.
which was helpful.
But yeah, we were all remote, and we are such a collaborative team. We like to watch cuts together and give our notes, and I think that's really beneficial for the editors to watch people's faces as they watch the cut. Like, that's a huge part of our process. And having to go remote was a huge bummer, not only for, that piece, but also just like talking on a Zoom call with 15 people is not the easiest thing to do. It's all very complicated. And I think we all have felt that over the past couple of years. But what we were really appreciative of is the fact that Lucid made it so that our file sharing was exactly like it was in Office. And so if we had a VFX shot that needed some temp work before we sent out a cut, we could have Eric, our VFX artist, just pop onto the server, make the shot, and it's there when he's done for us to drop in. And then that night, when we have an editor's cut, everyone can just log onto the server, watch that cut, and have an opinion for our morning Zoom in the morning. So it was really helpful there, because I think we were all really sad to have to be apart, and also just worried about how that would affect all of our edits. But we were able to overcome that issue, and I think it went really well considering.
Yeah. There are a lot of shows that I would, I think people are still doing shows remote, and there are a lot of shows that I would do remote, and this is not one of them, because I want to be in office with everybody, and we are really collaborative, and it feels the most collaborative when we're together. So it was tough. It was tough doing things over Zoom, and as soon as we could, we went back in office, because and it just felt right to be back. And it is funny now, the way we shot, we ended up doing a lot of season 3 and 4 stuff when we were still remote. And so going a year later, coming back to the season 4, because we shot at the same time, cuts that we had done on Lucid when we were remote, and now working on them together. And it's really interesting to see how they came together remote, and all was kind of the same, but it is different too, than being together,
Right. So, you're sort of forced into that situation, but you also mentioned that this was the first time that you were using productions in Premiere, and certainly the first time you were using LucidLink. So that was really a leap of faith by your team. I'm really thrilled that it worked out so well. But Cameron, did you have any contingency plans in place? I mean, what?
Is it bad if I say no? I mean, we used Premiere for the entire, I came on season 2, season 1 also used Premiere. So we knew we wanted to do productions, because I had actually used a friends and family kind of half-step beta build of productions on the project before, which worked super well, and I knew the productions was only going to be way better. So I had no doubt that productions was the way to go. And then when Adobe recommended Lucid, we just kind of went full in and said, let's do it, because we couldn't think of a better solution. We didn't have, it was like shuttling Drive wasn't going to work. We needed shared storage. So we just went with that. But yeah, I mean, and I also give credit to Caitlin, because she trusts us to make these decisions. It's like, what are we going to use? And I say, okay, we do this, and we just do it, and everyone kind of rolls with it, and it worked out just as it should have. And I would use productions at this point, and I would use Lucid on any remote type situation. I'd even like to use it as a hybrid work solution going forward, even if we are in-house. But and productions, just like everything I would use it on, even if it was just a short film, I would use productions, because for those who don't know, it basically just slims down and segments out a lot of the project, to the point where, I mean, I can talk a little getting a little technical here, but I can talk about our production. We're doing seasons 3 and 4 within the same production, which means we're doing 20 episodes in one shared space, which really put it to the test right away, as we're dealing with, I think we shot for 126 days. So we're just dealing with a lot of media and a lot of scenes and a lot of episodes, and it has worked flawlessly. And part of that is because we're segmenting out our scenes and our dailies and our cuts and VFX and music and sound effects all into these little mini separate projects that live within the production. And then that actually reduces the load time of loading up these projects. We're not getting large 35 megabyte Premiere projects anymore. When we did season 2, which was on these normal Premiere projects, we would get to a point where we would have to take a project and then start duplicating and deleting stuff out, so that we could actually open it within an hour kind of thing. So yeah, it is, everything worked out great, and luckily I didn't have to have a backup plan.
You guys should have seen our faces. Sorry, go ahead, Caitlin. I was saying, you guys should have seen our faces when we had our intro call with Lucid. Someone was showing us how to access media immediately, and everyone's jaw dropped. Like everyone was so excited seeing how it functioned that I think we were immediately like, we don't need a backup plan. Like this is the plan from now on. So all those things work so well. And we're so grateful to have these softwares like Premiere and Lucid to help us because, like our main job is to try and be creative. Like all of this stuff should be in the background. And it's really lovely that people on both teams have made it so that it does run in the background. It is really simple so that we can focus on our jobs and not on troubleshooting or any of those things that often have to happen.
Yeah. Premiere, or Adobe, when we talked to them, they were like, it's kind of magic. And people say that a lot about Lucid, and I hear from everyone. And I was like, oh, we'll see. And then, everyone that I've ever talked to about is like, oh no, it is kind of magic. It really does just work the way that it should work. And it's crazy.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I always appreciated about Lucid Link is just that you don't need to change the way that you work. You just work the way that you're most familiar. But that's really important when you're working with so many other team members from so many other disciplines. You don't want everyone to have to learn a completely new system or workflow. Now, as far as I know, you mentioned that assistant editors really need to know every frame of the footage coming in. Can you, Jen, can you tell me a little bit about the archives? And do you ever go back to the archives? How much do you need to retain there in your head?
We we'll get a random question every once in a while. Our editor will pop in the room and say, like, we need an insert of this thing. Can you remember across the past 3 seasons if we've ever had one that looks like this? And so our brain has to sort of chug through those things. But we've gone back to old projects multiple times this season and pulled from past episodes. We have a little Easter egg in one episode that we pulled last minute from season 2 to create a VFX shot. So we're returning back to our old drives constantly. Like we have every season drive in our office to be able to pull from. And it's really helpful, especially because, our show is very special. And I think that comes partly from the way it's shot. So to be able to pull things from that rather than like, I don't know, stock or a reshoot or something, it's really wonderful to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And the idea that you're keeping the team together, I think, is that much more important because you're relying on all the past knowledge. Sorry, Caitlin.
Oh no, I was gonna say we not only do we have drives of all of our projects and stuff, but we have all of our high-res media, right? So that's one of the reasons why we keep everything in post rather than working with post house necessarily for conforms, because not only like we don't have to go back to like find out where the LTOs are, pull media from, like we have it all in-house, which makes doing this a lot easier. And I also just want to note, like, to just go back to what we were talking about with Jen and Cam and if we ever had a backup plan or anything like that, is like one of the reasons why assistant editors are the most important hire I think that I make is because they are people who have to know how this stuff works. They're going to have to use it, right? And it's like an amazing sort of like set of tools that I think these guys have, where they are really creative, great editors. They've edited episodes in season 4 completely on their own. But at the same time, like really technical, really understand how all of this stuff works, and are never going to stop and be like, well, I don't know, it's weird, right? Like they have to know why something works or doesn't work, or like they always take it as far as they can to solve the problem. And we would never be able to make the show without them. So I just want to say, for all of you out there that want to be assistant editors, it's a really special job.
Now, I know that it's probably a little bittersweet, but season 4 is the final season of Atlanta. As far as what you do next and what you take with you, one of the things that I love seeing is when creatives in the industry come up with new ways of working, new techniques, new workflows, and then they share that with the rest of the field. Is there anything that you learned during during your Atlanta time that you're excited to pass on to, whatever the next production is?
Yeah,
Uh,
no,
we'll start with Cameron. Yeah.
sure. For sure. I think every show I like learn something that I want to take to the next show. And that's why our system now is so good, because I learned from A's before me. I got in like the indie comedy scene where everyone was really kind of uh, slowed down. Or, yeah, low budget kind of stuff. But yeah, so I learned from all those people, and then they taught me things. I teach other people things. I sort of joke that we have taught different post houses how to use Premiere turnovers, because now more and more people are using Premiere, and that's something that I would love to take to other shows and other things. But yeah, and then we do webinars and things like this, so I can tell people to use Premiere Productions, use Lucid. Like, here are the tips. Like, I don't want to be the only one who has all these like tricks. I want everybody to do it, and that's, I think, the best thing is we can sort of make all of TV and film, and we can do better across the board and be more streamlined.
Yeah. Jen, do you have anything more on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the technical is something that we try and bring to every following job, is like a better understanding of what we're doing and how it needs to happen and what the best and most efficient way to do it is. And I think Cam touched a little on that. Like, we will forever continue using a lot of strategies that we used here on the next show. But also just like creatively and interpersonally, I think that our team functions really well, and I'm so proud of the relationships that we have on this show and just the ideas that come out of it. And so just like sort of like curating this vibe, like things like that are like really important on shows moving forward, and like having a good attitude and like being willing to hear out everyone's ideas. Like, no idea is a bad one. No person is too low to offer their opinion. I think those are really helpful things too, that you don't always see on every show. Sometimes it can be very hierarchical, and like, I just am so happy to be working in this environment and so sad to be leaving it, that I hope that there is some way to sort of carry on, not only with the technical skills that we've learned, but just like how a team can work really, really well together and respect each other and value each other. And I think that that makes a show even better.
Well said. Caitlin?
Yeah, what Jen said.
Okay.
I missed like half of Cam's because my camera froze, but I imagine that you were talking about just, the thing that's happened to us, I think, is we have to find ways to apply some of the best things that we've learned to bigger projects, right? And we were allowed so much freedom to kind of like create this world on Atlanta. And I think it's really important that we want to protect all of that stuff that we've learned. But it's exciting because, like Kim said, I think going forward, something I'd really like to try is to have Lucid work with Lucid even when we aren't remote, right? Like, because I do think that the value of how it sort of functions with dailies, and so many shows we're working on now are shooting internationally around the country, in Europe, all over the place, and having that kind of like umbrella of safety is so nice for us, that I want to kind of continue doing that across as many projects as we can. And yeah, I think just bring all of the special things that we were able to build while we were making the show together for so long. It's such a rare thing. And yeah, we love it.
Fantastic. We've gotten a bunch of questions coming in over the course of our talk, and I'd love to present you with a few of them. So Devin was asking, how often do you have viewing sessions to ensure that the vision was being met by the producers and director?
So basically what we do, the process on an episode, I'll just tell you how we do it. So editor does an editor's cut. We send that to the director. Most of our episodes are directed by either Hiro Murai, Donald Glover. I think we usually have one or two guests in a season. We do a director's cut, and then we share that with our small EP team. And then we keep working on it, and then we share it to FX, and then we lock, and we go from there. Internally in post, usually when the editors are doing assemblies during production, we'll watch, all of us, the post team will just watch those assemblies. So that's kind of how we start to come up with issues that we might need. If we're like, ooh, we need this, or we feel like this is missing in this episode, that's how we communicate with production. And then we don't really do any directors or producers cuts until production wraps, right? So because our directors are EPs, they're on set the whole time. So that's scary to studios. They don't like that, but we really believe in this process because it allows directors and producers to be in production and then to be in post. So once we get into post, we do director's cuts, producers cuts, and then we usually watch it as a team again during the producer's cut phase to kind of make sure it's working, that it's playing. Hero really likes to experience the cuts in the room with our team. And then we all sit and talk about it from like the PA to Donald, right? Like everyone sits around and says what works and doesn't work and what they like, what they don't like, what was confusing. They take that in, they incorporate it into the edit, and then we send it to the studio for notes, and then we lock.
Great. Can someone speak a little bit about the round tripping for color and how that worked with Lucid Link and conforming and onlining in Premiere?
Yeah. This
You
is
guys.
my favorite part. I'll talk all day about the round trip. So I guess I'll do it kind of quick, but starting in the field, we're shooting ProRes proxy, or they're shooting a raw format, and we're making ProRes proxy transcodes, and that's what's getting sunk in Premiere using multicams. And so we're editing the entire time with these multicams, and I like multicams, even if we're not shooting two camera, even if it's just one camera, and that has to do with the onlining process, because using the multicam will retain a lot of the metadata for the video and the audio. And so we edit the episode together. Once we finally lock, we then go into our turnover phase. And that is the two main pieces of the turnover are color and sound. And so we do those, we basically take the sequence and we duplicate it into two different projects actually within the production and start flattening the multicams. And so for audio, that's just, we're really cutting with the actual high res WAV files. So those just get organized the way that the sound house likes it organized, in this case Formosa, and we send an AF and a picture reference EDL. And it's a pretty standard turnover in that way. And they start doing their thing. And then color is where we're doing our more in-house turnover. And so that's where we're actually mounting up our hard drives of our raw media, and we're unlinking from the proxy and relinking to the raw media. And then we're taking a check file and we basically go shot by shot and make sure that everything is lining up exactly the way we want it to. And then we are outputting a high res 4K file from our raw footage. And we call it a flat file because it really is just the whole episode in this high res format in the raw color space. And we send that with an XML, EDLs, and a reference file to our color house. And then they can apply all the edits to our color file and start coloring things from there. And then as far as VFX, we try and get as much VFX into our raw turnover or into our turnover as possible, but inevitably we're doing it VFX past our turnover date. So then we're sending patches, which the color house is dropping in and then coloring, but they're able to start getting the look set because they have the color space already. And then eventually those, sound and color get married in the delivery process. And then we make the delivery files and it airs on FX and Hulu.
Wow. As long as we're talking workflows, there's also a question about motion graphics. Are you working in After Effects? What is the process for sending footage back and forth? Are you able to use dynamic link, that sort of thing?
We actually don't use dynamic link. We've played around with it a little bit. I've used dynamic link more to turn over to VFX, in that I'm like sort of creating an After Effects project and then delivering that off. But since we've done season 2 to season 3, our in-house VFX artist Eric, who is incredible, has also gotten fancier, and now he uses Nuke. So it really, we can't use those dynamic links as much. We're really just doing a process of like pulling raw clips and delivering them to him, and then he's working on it and then sending us back either a check file or the raw clips that then we deliver it to color. But yeah, he uses Nuke, and he's like a wizard, and I watch him sometimes. I like sit in his room and just watch him with his like Nuke node tree and do stuff, and he's like, look how cool it is. I'm like, it's the Matrix. I of course get it. But it's very cool, and he's very good at it.
Very cool. Rodney is asking how you got started using Adobe Productions. It seems that he is a little hesitant to dive in head first. Did you do testing? What was your process?
We did a little, yes, we did do a little testing locally before we started the show. Just sort of, and I will say, I mean, we had the benefit of like, we have contacts at Adobe. So going into this process, we knew that if we had hiccups, we could email them and reach out to them and sort of get straight to the source of fixing them. I will say we barely had to do that, if at all. They did sort of give us like a crash course on what to do, which a lot of those resources are available just through Adobe's website now too. And there's tutorial videos as well. But I will never go back to production to regular Premiere, and even thinking about doing season 2 the way we did, it gives me a headache at this point because of how simple and straightforward Productions is. There's a little bit of a learning curve as far as like the bin locking and that kind of stuff. But it also is pretty foolproof, and that because of the bin locking, you're never overwriting each other. It's really preventing you from doing a lot of the like damaging work, even more so than on season 2, where it would be like, one person would try and open a project and you'd have to be like, I'm in it, don't do that. Or, have to duplicate and like archive projects a lot more carefully, because inevitably someone would mess something up. So yeah, I mean, we did test it a little bit, and I did do the beta stuff that I was talking about, which gave me a good sort of basis of how like on a sort of mental level how it works. I kind of understood it from that. But production is pretty simple once you really get into it.
Yeah.
I would also just say, like, depending on whether you're coming, kind of depends where you're coming from, right? If you're already working in Premiere and then you're gonna move into productions, like, do it. I think, a lot of people who have come up working in Avid or very traditional post setups, all of us on this Zoom, we came up doing some pretty gritty like alt comedy world things. So we'd all worked in Premiere for a long time and had done a lot of DIY approaches to post-production. We're very comfortable working in that world, as are our editors. There are many editors who like one crash and they just like won't touch their computer anymore, as you all know. And so I think we have a team that's like, yeah, let's try it. We'll figure it out. And that's why we're able to do what we do. And I think that's always to be taken into consideration. I've worked on many shows that need to function very traditionally because that's what the showrunner is familiar with, that's what the editors are familiar with, and that's fine. You can do that, but I love giving anyone who wants to like hang, like, we can like do more. It allows you to do more of everything. So we like that feeling, but it's not for everyone.
And you were talking about our editors, like they're very trusting of us.
Yes.
And so we're doing this this program. And they know how to use Premiere, but they never use Productions. And I was like, okay, we're doing this. If you have questions, come ask me. And that's sort of how it works. I will say, if you are on Avid, it is more like Avid in a lot of ways because of the shared environment and because of the project and the project locking. So I think they are trying to sort of make it more accessible to the Avid crowd, which I'm all for because I would love to just keep reading from there. I love it.
Awesome. I do see a question about what software works with an Adobe production workflow and LucidLink. I can't speak specifically to everything that works with productions, but LucidLink works with virtually everything. If it can read a file from a local drive, it can read a file from LucidLink. Here's a question from Tammy about security. There was a recent House of Dragon leak, and so she's wondering if there's any concerns about the security with the Atlanta finale.
Does anyone care what happens? I don't know. I don't think of our show as very plot driven, so I'm not too but I mean, we do all the things you're supposed to do. But I guess I just think of we're not really like a Marvel movie. Like, I don't think people are like trying to find out what happens. Although I guess Reddit would make that seem otherwise. I'm not sure. We do security protocols and things like that. And we are careful with how we approach transferring footage to vendors, et cetera. I think that's generally where those kinds of leaks happen. But internally, everything is pretty tight. So I think we feel pretty good about it. Don't come at me though, like I'll just tell you what happens. It's okay.
Well, I'm excited to see where the rest of the season goes and see that series finale. I wish it was going another season. I'm sure you're gonna miss this team, but I do want to thank you all for taking the time to talk to us today. It was really insightful. You seem like you're a just great team working together, and you make a great show. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for everyone watching. This was really fun.
Yeah, this is great. We love talking about the show. So
Awesome. And thank you, Future Media Conferences. All right.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to say, if there's any additional questions, if you have time to answer them, go right ahead there. And I know it's scheduled to the top of the hour, or bottom of the hour, whatever you say, but if there's a few questions you want to read, just please go ahead. Happy to stay on as long as you need.
Sure. Let's see. Do you see the advent of cloud-based remote workflows expanding your post team outside of local hubs like LA? Great question.
I think yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go.
I just say I know a lot of productions that are still remote, productions that are starting up that are remote. I know an editor who moved to Indiana and is continuing working, and did it like a year ago and was sort of like, taking the opportunity and just hoping it would work. Yeah, I think we're not necessarily going to be tied down to New York or LA, which is cool. I mean, a lot of us are not from New York and LA, so it would be nice to go home to our families and still get to do creative work, which would be really cool.
Or even just be able to buy a house,
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's no like one way to do post, right? And I think if there's anything that we believe in Atlanta, and I believe about making things, is that I'd rather work with a person who I love to work with wherever they are than to force something to kind of cookie cutter something into a place or situation like that. I want to always be as adaptive as possible to just like what works for the show.
Yeah.
Here's a fun one. how is it decided where the show title gets placed in each episode?
Oh, that's a very good
Uh,
question.
Yeah.
You wanna talk to that? You're excited about it.
I mean, it's a creative decision, right? And so they'll shoot a plate. Every episode will get just like a blank looking shot, and we'll say, "Oh, this must be the title shot." And then it is largely a collaboration within post. Hero often is the one who has like the vision for it. He's usually the one who shot it, so he has some idea there. And then it's a conversation with our in-house artist Eric, who can sort of be like, oh, that is very, very difficult to do. What if we put it over here instead? um, so it's a collaboration of like, what's our timeline? How long do we have to make this look cool? And then it is put into the show via Eric. And then who's our graphic artist who does the designing of just the title itself again?
It's for season 3.
Yeah, so we worked with this graphic artist, this French sort of like font design man named Tersa. That's his sort of Instagram name. And he did a lot of the graphic design kind of font building, and then he would deliver a project to Eric, and then Eric would do like the 3D modeling and whatever kind of like comping was necessary to lay those designs into the shots. That was how we did season 3. Season 4 has kind of been like pretty much Eric, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Did you do any of those practically, or is everything composite?
We had one shot practically that we then changed in VFX.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think they're all VFX. I don't think
Yeah.
there's a single practical one.
And Eric's so incredible. When he changed it in his own VFX, it looked more real than the practical
looked
that was
better.
shot on set.
Yeah, it really did. The real one looked kind of fake. Yeah, I mean, Eric. Hmm?
No, you go.
I was gonna say, like in one of our episodes, the title's on a cake, and Eric literally made like a 3D model of the cake and like created the entire thing in a 3-dimensional space so that you could comp it in and it would look like correct. And that's why they all seem very real, is because he is like truly an artist.
Wow. Devin wants to know if a person wants to get started on the assistant editor route, how does that happen? Trying to transition from post coordinator to editorial. Any advice?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a post coordinator already, then that's a great start to just have the knowledge of the industry. Let's just say you weren't already in post. I would say post PA is like the thing to do. I think that's how we both came up, is just getting in the room, making the connections. And of course, everyone hates when you say you got to network, but that is how this industry runs. So networking is another important way of getting into the door. But then it's really just like building your skill set, and that I think can be done in office with the AEs that you're currently working with. I think that a lot of us are really happy to share what we know and do a lot of like training on the fly, because that's how we learned. There's not a ton of like boot camp sort of things that you can go attend. You really just have to learn in the room. So I'd hope that most AEs would be very generous with their knowledge, because that's the only way that we're going to spread our ideas and create more AEs who can then assist for us when we move up to editing. It's really important that we all share that information together. So yeah, I would say like reach out to any AEs that if you're looking to build the skills. And then if you're just looking to find the opportunity, 2 really helpful people to know in post for becoming an assistant are editors and post producers. So, Caitlin has been a really great contact for me and also a really good friend. And we've gotten to work on lots of shows together. And she introduced me to Kyle, who I am the assistant for. And the 2 of them just really keep me employed. So relationships with those people are really helpful with getting a job. And it's really just a matter of getting someone to take a chance on you. If you're doing your first show as an assistant, I highly recommend doing something that has another assistant on the show so that you can learn from them as well while you're working. But really just like reaching out to the people around you who know how things work, because that's really the best way for us to learn, is from each other.
Once again, well said. Well, we are at the top of the hour. I know that there were still a few questions. Any technical LucidLink questions, feel free to reach out to us. I know there were some about security and pinning and all those fun things. But again, I want to thank you all for your time so much. Caitlin, Jen, Cameron, this was really fantastic.
Thank
I
you.
had a great
Thanks for
time
the
talking to you.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
All right. And thanks everyone for joining.